Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Bolton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is now January 16th, 2020. Time for yet another show, and should be an interesting one. I don't know whether we're going to be able to do anything, but I guess glory in the revelations that the rest of the world, I guess, is coming to the realization that Lev Parnas is who we thought he was. But interesting to see that he's now telling the other side of the story. Still don't know whether I believe him entirely. But to the extent that it can be used to pry the investigations back open and help explain the pervasive guilt of Donald Trump and the Trump administration, I guess we'll take it. He might be trying to save his own skin. I see a lot of people out there theorizing this morning that he's actually perhaps adopting a tactic of spilling the beans before he can be assassinated by Vladimir Putin, or I guess the idea being, well, it's no longer worth assassinating him. He's told all there is to tell. But I do have a feeling that they don't care whether it's worth assassinating you or not. They just feel like they want to do that, so they do it. But hey, you know, he's lived a long, full life, I guess, and I hope nobody gets killed in all this, except that, of course, all of it is being perpetrated by dirty, filthy, mobbed-up scumbags, and, you know, occasionally people get killed in those kinds of exchanges. So what can you do? Try not to sign up for the mafia if the option is available to you. The other dead person in all of these adventures, Jeffrey Epstein being exhumed again, which is fine by me. I say you should keep doing it over and over again. Lots of outlets out with the story now that the I guess the U.S. attorney down in the Virgin Islands saying, well, we are getting increasing access to evidence that Epstein was trafficking in young girls right up until the end, and some of them as young as 11 on his private island, and we're going to investigate, and we're looking into these things. So lots of outlets covering it. I've seen reports at a couple of the major news outlets. I think we'll try to at least work in there, if not begin with, the Miami Herald, which had done all of the really most valuable work right towards the end in particular. And so many things to catch up on. Daily Co's Radio, now live, according to Bill, who's in Maine, so I don't know exactly how he can tell, but, you know, maybe he's surveilling me in real time. We don't really know exactly what could be going on here. And he says this about Daily Co's Radio being live. Kagro X, me, David Waldman. Hi, good to meet you. I host the show. Breaks open a new sordid chapter in Ukraine Gate. We're going to make it a gate. By revealing that Lev Parnas, is this true, is an anagram for nasal perv. That might be right. Yes. Yeah, probably. I mean, are you like a big anagram fan, or did you use one of those Google thingies? That's not that hard to figure out, but it's never occurred to me. So good call there. Nasal perv. I don't know. Makes me think like maybe Lev Parnas was a fake name. Anyway, discussion and analysis happening now on Netroots Radio. Discussion, anyway. We'll see what kind of analysis we get to today. It's lots of things happening all over the place. Here comes Greg Dworkin. So lots to catch up on. The articles of impeachment delivered with all the pomp and circumstance that he told us would accompany such an occasion yesterday, last evening. Bit of a tussle with the press over whether or not the event could be photographed, and I'm not certain how that came out. I think maybe they were just trying to restrict them from taking photographs on the Senate floor of the delivery, which is usually something that they prohibit still photography of anyway, but they get video photography of it. It's on C-SPAN. It's televised, and I think I don't know whether this one was televised or not, but I was worried that they were going to try and prevent that, and I don't know. We were told that fairness dictated that we follow the Clinton rules for this impeachment, and the Clinton delivery was very much televised. I watched the tape yesterday. What I didn't get a chance to watch yet is Rachel Maddow spending an hour with nasal perv Lev Parnas. That's an amazing find there. And I haven't had a chance to watch it. I'm pretty sure, though, he says that Trump is pretty guilty, and so is Rudy Giuliani, and that all the things that we thought were true actually are true. And I think we knew that. We could probably guess that because I don't know if there's a show that spent more airtime on Lev Parnas than ours. But if they did, I will put them under surveillance and rub them out, and then we'll be number one. So anyway, Greg Dworkin is here under no threat of surveillance or assassination from this end of the Skype connection. I'm just
that
saying,
we know of.
I don't know who else is listening. I don't know where Abby is. I'm just, if it was a cat, I'd worry, but I think she's probably pretty safe.
Yeah, that's true. So, the interview with Rachel Maddow was a bombshell, and of course, Parnas is following it up this morning with interviews on other shows. But the point isn't so much about the stuff you knew. Oh. It's that he specifically said,
in that case, yes.
Barr was in on it, and also Pence and also Pompeo. Everybody was in. Everybody was in the loop. Everybody knew. It was all the team.
We knew about that guy. We knew about that guy. All right.
They knew what we were doing in Ukraine, and they knew that we were putting the squeeze on the new president. And then he just explained in detail how that happens. And of course, he's a thug and a lowlife, and people will say, well, how can you trust him? But of course, that's always the case when somebody gets indicted and then starts singing like a canary.
Right. Or is elected
and there's
president.
Two important points to remember about this. Number one is that he brings documents. Right, so that he can verify this happened and this happened.
They're all fake.
Including, for example, phone conversations recorded with Rudy calling him and him calling Rudy, so they obviously knew each other. And, of course, maybe the bigger point that everybody seems to lose track of, because don't forget the Republicans will say, well, it's a Democrat witness, and what good is that? They always call these people and they're Democrat witness. Well, every single one of them was hired by this White House.
Well, they only hire the best people.
They only hire the best people. These are the people that you hired to do your stuff.
Right.
And so, of course, they're going to be lowlifes. That's how it works. You're hiring lowlifes. Don't, lose track of that very fact. I have a local angle for you before we get into the bigger picture here, just to finish what we started yesterday. I DM'd you a picture I took of this morning's local paper, the News Times, that used to be the Danbury News Times. It's a Hearst paper. Mm-hmm. And the big headline is News Times Insider Exclusive, Hide on Radar of Secret Service. Feds candidate made concerning posts, veiled threats months before the texts were released.
Yeah.
In June of 2019, Secret Service contacted Connecticut police about Robert Hyde, a candidate running for Congress who appears to have helped businessman Lev Parnas conduct surveillance of the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. More on that with the Parnas interview. The Secret Service alerted police in Avon that Hyde had made concerning posts on his social media accounts, and they included veiled threats, including reference to the time in Florida he was picked up by the police because he claimed that the Secret Service were after him.
Well, they were.
And he was brought to a medical facility after that. So he does seem to be a troubled person,
yes,
which Lev Parnas referred to last night during the interview and said, I got these things from him. I know who he is, but, I always thought he was kind of a bit of a, he didn't say it in so many words, but he said a bit of a nut job.
Yeah,
and I didn't really take it seriously. And you know what? He probably is. And so rather than jump to the conclusion that they were trying to get the ambassador killed, I think it's more likely that he really was a bombastic, I will write and say anything to make myself look tough kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably the context that this should be taken. But the point is that he was in a position to be making these threats, right, and nothing was done. And Mike Pompeo simply turned his back and said, what do I care? It's my employees. What do I care? I'm working for the White House, not the State Department.
Right. Well, we learned recently that sometimes your actions, especially when you're involving other international actors, sometimes have unintended consequences. And the unintended consequence of leaving a possibly crazy wannabe hitman in charge of surveilling a U.S. ambassador is that the U.S. ambassador may accidentally, if from your perspective, get assassinated. I didn't tell him. I wasn't serious about that. He was just a kook. I let him do what he wanted to do. Well, don't let him stalk and threaten to assassinate ambassadors. And
well,
then
no
we'll
one
be
rid
happy.
me of this meddlesome priest.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I guess he's on their radar.
We don't need details on that. The general story is what everybody understands.
So I'm curious about what it means to be on the Secret Service radar, because in between June and now, he spent a lot of time right next to President Trump, and okay, so fine, he's an operator for Trump, and Trump's not afraid of him, but he's photographed with every member of his family, with the exception of that kid that we can't talk about. It's nuts.
So
what kind of radar
Chris Murphy,
is this?
It's crazy. It is crazy. Every new piece of evidence, Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, tweets, every new piece of evidence is shocking. I refuse to let this feel normal. But Parnas just confirms what's been clear for a while. The president of the United States personally directed a conspiracy to use taxpayer dollars to destroy his political rivals and rig the election.
Uh-huh.
Now,
Yes.
Again, the implications are big. Maggie Haberman tweets, Pence Chief of Staff Mark Short responds to Parnas, who implicated Pence in his interviews last night. Parnas basically said, it's very crystal clear to me and everybody else. Everybody knew that Rudy threatened the president of Ukraine and said, if you don't come on our side and do what we tell you, bad things will happen. It was resisted by the Ukrainian president.
Yes.
And then Giuliani said, okay, bring down the hammer. And the next day, Pence cancels his trip to Ukraine for the inaugural.
That's the hammer.
Well, you're not getting what you
right.
said you need. We're not getting the show of support. So
Yes,
we're talking about a quid
Yeah.
pro quo. It's right there.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I mean, they wanted it for diplomatic and political reasons, although I do wonder whether that really resonates.
The quid is
with
there, the
Zelensky.
quo is there. Pence Chief of Staff Mark Short responds and says, Democrat witnesses have testified under oath in direct contradiction to Lev Parnas' statements last night. Again, remember, every one of those, quote, Democrat witnesses is a Republican hire.
Yeah.
Every one of them.
Good point. And
But wait. It spreads. So now he also says, and also I was in contact with Devin Nunes. And so now Devin Nunes is admitting he talked to Lev Parnas. Remember, he said he didn't recognize the name, but now all of a sudden he suddenly remembers.
Okay.
Tom Nichols, one of our favorite Never Trumpers, sums it up this way, and I'll have one from Andrea Bernstein from WNYC Reporter. But Tom Nichols says in a few tweets, a few thoughts. Parnas is almost certainly trying to launder his rep, get out of trouble, not completely reliable, but this is too much to be made up of whole cloth. Of course, everyone in the White House knew because Trump can't shut up.
Yes.
The panic about Joe Biden being nominated is so intense that even Fox News is involved. So who's paying Victoria Tunsing and Joe DeGeneva? Is it
Besides
Fox News?
Firtash, I learned to pronounce it.
Is it Firtash or is it Fox News? Or is there any difference?
Oh, that's a good question.
Hi, Derek Harvey. Welcome, my son, to the machine. Derek Harvey, that would be Devin Nunes' aide.
Yes,
who
right.
Nunes designated to be the contact for Lev Parnas.
Yes. And he did that job.
Hi, Derek Harvey.
Hi. Well.
New, says Tom Nichols, but it's always possible he was too dumb to understand what he was knowing.
Oh.
Bolton knew. So his offer to testify was a threat or just getting ahead of being dirtied up by something he thought he was a bad idea. And if you think Parnas is lying or embellishing, just get Bolton, Rudy, Harvey, and the rest of them and put them under oath.
Yes. I mean, it'll be interesting because they'll lie, and then you'll have a he said, she said, but at least it'll happen in front of everybody and under oath.
Where it's a crime.
Yeah.
And then if you have documents to prove they were lying, okay, it's a crime.
Dang. Yeah. I'm not certain that they would be charged, but, whatever.
So Andrea Bernstein, WNYC reporter,
Yes.
who was great on the Conegate thing with the New Jersey governor, Chris Christie. I reread the documents Lev Parnas sent to the House and some thoughts. What's shocking is the blow-by-blow account from the people actually carrying out the scheme. Get Zelensky to announce that the Biden case will be investigated. Parnas writes from Vienna, scrawling it on a piece of paper from the hotel.
Do crime.
Vienna, of course, is home of U.S. indicted oligarch Dmitry Firtash, for whom Parnas worked.
Yes.
Victoria Joe retained, Parnas writes, referring to the legal team Firtash hired to enable him to escape charges. Don't forget, Townsend and DeGenoa represent Firtash.
Yes. Now,
This strategy includes trashing the Bidens. This reference to Ukraine ledger, the document that showed Paul Manafort, the campaign manager for the Trump election, don't forget, who's in jail, for which he's serving 7 years in prison, after being tested in 2 U.S. jurisdictions. This is the document Rudy was trying to discredit. Enter Rudy Giuliani. He wants a corrupt Ukrainian prosecutor to come to the U.S. The State Department doesn't want to let him in because he's corrupt. Plus, he lied on his visa application. Rudy writes he's going to get the visa. I have person number 1 on it.
right.
Person number 1, that would be Trump. But you know who stops him? The U.S. ambassador, Maria Yovanovitch. That's when we start seeing texts from the new guy, Robert Hyde. F that bitch, he writes. His texts indicate he's monitoring Yovanovitch's whereabouts in her digital communications. He writes he has a guy on the inside. Again, this may be all made up in his head, but this is what he's writing. They're willing to help if we would like a price. Guess you can do anything in the Ukraine with money. The power of money courses through these documents. Firtash's money, Parnas's desire to make money, Rudy's work as a private citizen who was being paid $500,000 by Firtash.
Right.
Right? He's doing it for free, except for the $500,000 he's getting from, the oligarch.
Right. I'm thinking of
It shows
becoming a volunteer.
the power of money in Ukraine and maybe the U.S. and what Trump and Rudy and Parnas did to import it to the U.S. And we're about to find out if there's an oligarchy here too. That's her comments, and I think that's right on the money. So, of course, the incredible irony is this morning, Ukraine's Interior Ministry announces criminal probe into alleged illegal surveillance of former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Maria Yovanovitch, after text messages released by House investigators showed Robert F. Hyde and Lev Parnas discussing her being tracked in Kiev,
yes, right. We're on that now.
So what does that all mean? Near Tandon retweeted that and said, we now live in a world where the Ukrainian government's less corrupt than ours. This was being covered up by Bill Barr and Mike Pompeo. Pompeo had direct supervision because he's supposed to be the head of the ambassadors. And Bill Barr knew about this because this is indictment through Southern District of New York, who, although I always consider them sovereign, and so do they, are actually part of the Department of Justice. So Barr was sitting on this. And the only reason it got published is because they got permission from a judge, Parnas's lawyer did, to get it out.
Right. Well, I think we should arrest or impeach him. But we may not get to that this week.
So Ted Lieu, one of the Democratic congressmen, says he was threatened by Devin Nunes and his lawyer. They were going to sue him. They sue everybody, including Devin Nunes' cow on Twitter. Right. But they were going to sue him for suggesting that he and Lev Parnas knew each other. Meanwhile, Rand Paul threatens fellow Republicans with explosive witness votes. The Kentucky senator is vowing to squeeze vulnerable GOP incumbents if they side with Democrats during Trump's impeachment trial. He's threatening to make them vote on Hunter Biden testifying. And as many people have pointed out, so what? This isn't a threat.
Yeah.
Have them all testify. You want to testify? Ted Cruz. You want them all to have them all testify. Have Bolton, have Mulvaney, have Pompeo, have Trump, have them all. And then you can have Hunter Biden.
I guess.
That's a fair trade, 20-1.
I'm not sure what. Yeah, I don't know. Rand Paul's not really
what
good
he would
at
bring.
this.
Maybe it would be embarrassing, but not nearly as embarrassing as the actual fact witnesses who know stuff. And if that's what it takes to get them, I don't really care.
Right. I mean, I guess I'm sure that they could have fun with Hunter Biden and make him look bad. And then another of the witnesses will come on and say, essentially, there really wasn't anything wrong with what he was doing with respect to what Trump's claims are. And it was my job to bribe people to make stuff up so that it would look like maybe that was true. So I'm just here to tell you that. Okay.
What new book is coming out that supposedly suggests that Trump has a new idea about international law? He says that you ought to really just make bribing legal. It's crazy that our businessmen are restricted Why can't
Right.
they make bribes like I do in New York City? Isn't the quote from the book, but it's basically how he ran his business.
Don't make up quotes. He'll accuse you of I don't know what. But yes, you're paraphrasing.
He'll accuse me of being
and
Adam Schiff.
I forgot.
Nobody
yes.
knows who it is, by the way, because nobody recognized him on Jeopardy. So,
That's amazing.
running
Those are
against
smart
Adam
people.
Schiff as your killer app, ad campaign with San Francisco values and all that sort of stuff, it just doesn't work.
Good point. Yeah, I'd forgotten about the book almost, but yes, a new book says all the things that we thought were true. Once again,
Now, Bolton is still threatening
to
to say everything that we think is true in his new book.
yes. Although he's
And
in
you know what? At
Doha.
this point, it doesn't really matter. It's the documents. And the interview with Maddow and Lev Parnas shows why. Parnas can say whatever he wants. When he's got documentation to back it up, it's, oh, my goodness, that's all of a sudden real.
Yes, and he's having a great time releasing all his photos with Trump and family. And I will say, this should not be unexpected. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. He loves those pictures. Like, what's his name? Hyde. They're very similar.
Well, they all
in
do that, right?
but-
Because the way
yeah.
that they puff themselves up is they show these pictures of so-called important
Yeah.
people, scare quotes around that.
Right,
And then, I have influence.
right. I mean,
Look at my
that's
picture when they
definitely
deny
one
that
play.
you know who I am.
But yeah, I think there was another more sinister part of it. It's a backstop for Parnas. He's up until he flipped, he was a pro-Russian, ex-Ukrainian operator, and I doubt very much that he somehow missed the lesson on, take pictures with yourself with everybody, because then you can use it later when you get in trouble. So I think he was operating on that level from the beginning. He always knew
Right.
he might
Now,
have to flip.
I turned this on this morning not because it was going to tell me information I didn't know, but I just sort of like to monitor how things are going. So I turn on Morning Joe. They spent an hour on the Parnas stuff. That's very unusual for them. They usually do everything in segments when you watch these 1 hour shows on cable. 10 minutes on this, 15 minutes on this. Now let's move to that. As soon as it starts to get interesting and we start to get in depth, well, we don't have time for that. Thanks so much for coming. They spent an hour going over that Maddow interview with clips. It was pretty amazing. And it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Now-
Well, that's good.
When you say a big deal, what do you mean by that? Well, thank you for asking. So it's not that
yes,
you're
what do I
going to
mean?
convince Republicans in the Senate to somehow vote differently. What you're doing is you're affecting public opinion.
Right.
And
I'm
those
public.
who are running, because the Senate is going to vote to acquit him. That's not really the question. I suppose there's a small chance that may not happen, but it'll take bombshells bigger than this. But what you're doing is
Maybe
you're
real
setting the
bombs.
predicate for everybody understanding that Trump is a crook and a liar.
Yeah.
And so when you then have new evidence, why doesn't this new evidence move? Because everybody already understands that Trump is a crook and a liar. And the fact that Trump is a crook and a liar is one of those things that just sort of sinks in so that when you go to vote in November, everybody understands Trump is a crook and a liar. At this point, the Democrats just have to put up somebody who's credible and they win. Now,
Yeah.
can they put up somebody credible? Well, the never-Trumpers and the Republicans will argue, well, we still have to see. But these are one of those things where, the fundamentals are the things that decide elections. It's how the economy's doing and the presidential approval, and it doesn't matter who the candidate is. It's like one of those situations. This is going to be a referendum on Trump. It almost doesn't matter, although it still does, who the candidate's going to be. It took a perfect storm in 2016 for the Democrats to lose. Thank you, Jim Comey. But, the perfect storm may go the other way this time. And remember, those who don't like either candidate, Biden or Trump, break for Biden 7-1. So Trump isn't doing himself any favors by publicly participating in a cover-up. And what Parnas does is it sets the predicate for, okay, so the Republicans are covering everything up. Pompeo was covering it up. He wouldn't stand up for his own people. And obviously Bill Barr is covering it up because he refused to investigate reasonable charges. And even if they were unreasonable, even if it was some nut job in Connecticut who was threatening a Ukrainian ambassador from his basement, and the Secret Service has already checked him out, why are you doing nothing about it? And by the way, you let her be fired, and she felt threatened. All of that is stuff we already know.
Yes, that's true.
What are you doing? Where are you, Mike Pompeo? How could you not be discussing it this morning? How can you be blowing off committee questioning? Well, now we know why.
Right.
by the House when they call you to testify.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a cover-up. And if you remember the cover-up's worse than the crime, that came out of Watergate. We're looking at it real time. I don't see how that helps Trump because he wins by stonewalling.
Well, this is like I said, it's a bombshell, explosive, and it's worth reminding everybody for trying to influence public opinion as much as you can, or possibly changing some votes. Pointing out exactly how ludicrous it's going to be when Republicans say, well, murder, what's the difference? I win.
He was here today. He's not here tomorrow. What's the difference?
Who cares?
Who cares?
By the way, yes, as you point out, Barr, of course, covering this up. And when you said why not investigate even maybe less than credible allegations, that's what he's been spending taxpayer money on all along. Flying around the world investigating ludicrous assertions to further his own conspiracy theory. By the way, tagging along with him.
By the way, stop treating him like a serious attorney general. This guy is John Mitchell. Treat him as such.
He's been running around the world with John Durham, who, as I recall, is the U.S. attorney for Connecticut, which is apparently was left unguarded for crazy lunatic international wannabe hitman Robert Hyde to start pulling his hijinks. Why was the federal law enforcement in Connecticut asleep or absent this whole time? I don't know. Maybe it's coincidental.
Well, how can reliably blue Connecticut, not have a unanimous vote against Trump in the last election? Because guys like Robert Hyde live here.
Oh, that's true too, and they're able to run around unguarded because the U.S. attorney for that district is
running
elsewhere.
For Congress. He's still running for Congress.
Yes, that's true. So you have the opportunity.
No, he's
Wouldn't
not
that
a
be
serious
something?
Candidate. Yes, he's still running for Congress.
True, but that must have been a huge laugh for all of them. As this ended up resulting in impeachment, they must have been laughing the whole time that if this drags on long enough, not only will Trump win because of it, but I'll get a chance to vote on the next impeachment resolutions as having been part of this conspiracy. How funny will that be?
Well, that's Devin Nunes.
Yes, right. We're already doing that, so it won't even be the first guy. So you might as well give up on that now, Hyde. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I am still stalking and physically surveilling Greg Dworkin from Connecticut. We have more to talk about, but limited time to do it. So hurry up.
We should. You're right. If I didn't,
happening?
I can't even remember if I did. But if we didn't mention the fact that Ukraine is now investigating, just as Donald Trump wanted, except this time they're investigating the hit job. And the funny part, of course, if you're an irony fan, is that Ukraine wants it to be a serious international investigation, and so they want the help from the FBI to investigate the allegation that Yovanovitch was under surveillance. The FBI, when I say the FBI, I mean Bill Barr's FBI.
Oh, that guy. What about the guy who's nominally in control of the FBI? What was his name again?
You mean Christopher Wray?
That guy. He occasionally wanders off on his own.
Yeah, well, he's going to be in Mark Esper Defense Secretary territory because, if you contradict these guys, then you're gone. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's just the way it works.
Well, this could be interesting, too.
Let's turn to domestic politics for a minute, just because the Iowa caucuses are coming up. I feel like it would be irresponsible if we didn't speculate about what it means that the AP, who is the official caller of these things, is going to work with the Iowa Democratic Party and report 3 sets of results from the party's presidential caucuses.
What?
First, they report who everybody's first choice is, which they never did before. Then they'll report who the caucuses changed to after some persuasion and some didn't make the 15% viability mark.
I see.
And then finally, they'll report how many delegates you got, which is the traditional AP call for who wins. So they'll do all 3. And in theory, it is possible that you have 3 different winners. This is better than those non-binding ones. For that reason, Iowa is being diminished. Right? It's like a 4-way tie for first. The candidates are not spending a whole lot of time there. A lot of them who are senators are going to be pulled out of Iowa anyway for the trial next week. Right, so they'll be busy downplaying the significance. Exactly. All of that will happen. And at the same time, when the results are announced, it may or may not be muddled. So I sent you a picture of Ladbrokes, who bets on politics. Okay. For the first time, the Iowa Democratic Party will report 3 sets of results in the party's presidential caucuses. There's no guarantee that all 3 will show the same winner, says AP. Ladbrokes retweeted that with the comment, bookies, and then one of those emojis of a, oh my gosh, face. Oh. And then says, it's almost as if they don't run these elections for the benefit of the betting markets. Well, that was pretty cute. We don't. Yeah, it's almost as if they don't run them for the benefit of the voting public either. Right. And so if you really want to make Iowa caucuses irrelevant, just keep doing what you're doing. Make them super complicated. Make it so that nobody can go. Make it so that when you do it, you don't understand the results, and then make it so that when you publish the results, nobody understands what it means. I will say that's a great way. I am in favor of it. I just decided. It's very complicated. It's very nuanced, and it requires paying close attention, parsing the results, and understanding what they really mean. And I'm pro that, and I should be anti "give me a winner" horse race thing. But then we're supposed to count delegates eventually. But I guess I kind of like the nuance of it. I guess I don't like the fact that it's complex and long and is confusing, and so even fewer people will participate. And I want more people in it, but I want... Yeah, they really just have to junk the whole thing and go to a primary. But, of course, that's about money. Yeah. We talked about that last cycle. Yes. And also, I mean, they hold it so early. I think people want to stay inside longer. I say that because, by the way, because when the caucus and a primary are paid for by different people. It's state versus local party. True, and that gets to be an argument. Yeah, that's an interesting angle on it that I had forgotten. But we have mentioned that before. And it's weird. Well, we mention it every 4 years because we forget about it. Who cares? I guess that's it, really. The space there. This is how we don't dislodge Iowa. We don't really care after a couple of months. Yeah, we're here for institutional memory so we can remind each other. Didn't we talk about that 4 years ago? Yeah, I think we actually. What did we do about that? Right. What did we talk about in the intervening 3.5 years? What filled up the interstitial? I don't know. I don't remember. Yeah. All I know is that in March I said I got plenty of time before the next Iowa. And then all of a sudden we were here. Anyway, so that's really the big news. Robert F. Hyde is a local nut job, and he shouldn't be taken too seriously. And everything that Lev Parnas says is hugely important, but should be corroborated. And so the whole point is Democrats are saying this is explosive stuff. We need to corroborate this. And the Republicans are saying, let's just move on. Obviously, we don't even want to look at this. Yeah. And those two points of view are going to clash. And those senators who have been on the trail aren't really in a position to talk about it next week because by the rules, as I understand it, of the Senate, they're supposed to shut up and listen. And if you want to ask any questions, you have to submit them in writing to Chief Justice Roberts. And you don't get to stand up and do Jim Jordan and jump on the table and take your jacket off. Right. And there are actually a lot of the senators are pressing the White House, please don't send any of those guys from the House as your defense team. We don't want to hear from them. So my last part of the segment here is going to discuss exactly the process that the Senate will use because it's still something of a mystery to all of us. First, let us comment on the fact, and we did talk about this, so I'm glad we brought it up before it happened, but the pomp and circumstance of watching the House managers walk over, which was televised, clumpy shoes and everything, was actually pretty compelling and serious and sort of somber. had a signing ceremony. Everybody, Nancy Pelosi used a pen, like every letter was a different pen.
Right.
And then at one point she looked up and smiled, and Never Trump, her Twitter exploded and said, "Oh my God, you ruined everything. Look, you're not taking it seriously." And so, come on, let's just
Right. They said look up for a picture, children. So she did.
And so the gravitas of it had to be covered by cable. Then they wanted to break away and talk about the vaporware trade deal, which everybody's already forgotten about because it's cable TV and the president's on, so you have to show something. And then it was back to impeachment all day, and then this Parnas thing broke, and then that's what's going to be the discussion today. But the thing about the Senate is today what happens, I guess, and again, I'm no expert on this. I'm trying to glean this from the news reports, is that this is the day that Chief Justice Roberts is invited in, according to what Mitch McConnell said yesterday. And then all the senators are sworn in, and there's a log that they have to sign. So there's like a Senate oath book.
It's just a log. It's a piece of wood
that they sign.
Yes.
That says, yes, I take this oath and I promise to be a fair witness or a fair juror, or whatever it is the language is. But I guess there may be some votes, some procedural votes. The trial starts next Tuesday. But still up in the air are questions like, will the Democrats be permitted to show video evidence like they did at the Clinton trial? Because I'm presuming the Republicans are going to do everything possible to not allow pictures that make Trump look bad. So they're going to do every procedural thing in the book that they can, because once the trial starts, McConnell isn't under control anymore. It's Roberts.
Oh, yes.
So until then, it's no, you're not allowed to use video. No, you're not allowed to bring witnesses. No, you're not allowed to mention his name. If you mention his name and say something bad, it's against the rule of the Senate. You get thrown. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, but they're going to do all sorts of stuff so that the public sees the least amount of material possible.
Yes.
And that's why the Parnas interview and all the pressure on the Senate from the public is so important. The public wants to see Bolton testify. The public will want to have Parnas testify. The public will want to have the people who Parnas implicates testify. So how far the Senate can go, they already didn't want to do this trial. Now they have to do the trial. Remember the sequence of events. He'll never be impeached. Okay, he'll be impeached, but nothing will ever happen from it. They'll go to the Senate and they'll just dismiss it. Okay, they're not dismissing it, but they'll never have witnesses. Okay, now they're negotiating over the witnesses. This is the progression that we've seen. And we really don't know how it all ends.
Yeah, I do. I'm not telling.
Yeah, well, it's gonna wind up with his voted not to remove him, but the damage done to him in the meantime is enormous, and how much damage and how that procedural parts of it, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and who votes where, we still don't know any of that.
Yes. I guess that's true. We'll see.
I'm not counting on Susan Collins. I'm looking at people like Lamar Alexander and Chuck Grassley and some of the other, senior people. Not the ones in the news, not the ones you think of as the vulnerable. If you're vulnerable, you're going to vote with the president because you have no other choice. Yeah. Putting pressure on Cory Gardner is important because you want him gone, but ridiculous in terms of I'm going to change his vote. It's Lamar Alexander's vote and Mitt Romney's vote that matters here. Collins is a special case. You'd think she'd matter like Murkowski, but because she's running, she's going to stick as close to the president as possible because she has to. Without that, she's toast. So you can't expect anything out of Collins this time.
Yep, that's true, and it's rare that you can expect anything out of her, but occasionally she gets pushed
on occasion she'll vote with Murkowski. On occasion.
Yeah.
But not this time.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see whether she's persuadable by Murkowski's charms this time, or whether she feels She certainly feels pressure from home. I guess
she does. Because every few days she announces, I would have helped the Democrats, but Chuck Schumer was mean to me. Kind of quotes.
Yeah. Well, all right. I think hopefully we're at the end of her public story.
Then if that happens, I will tell you right now, I will not be troubled.
Yes, not deeply, not superficially, nothing. She came up with a different word the other day. She said something that was brand new for impeachment purposes, I guess.
I guess.
Can't remember what
Anyway,
it was.
that's my summary for today to let you know where things stand.
Okay.
Expect to hear a lot about Lev Parnas today. A lot. And then I'll be back on Monday, and we'll talk again at that time.
Yes, why not try that?
With the trial starting on Tuesday.
Here
so
in
we'll
America.
give a preview of the trial.
Oh, okay. Yeah, unless it happens on television, in which case I will miss the whole thing. But
yeah, well,
the trial I might be able to. Well, I won't be able to see that either. But still, the point is something.
They'll broadcast it online. You don't have to turn on the TV.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait over the weekend. I am curious to see how the president spends his time this weekend a little bit, but
sure.
People are learning to kind of ignore
anything
him.
You know about procedure and how you think this is going to, show up on the Senate, tell us. We're all ears, even if it's tomorrow's show.
All right. Well, we'll try that, perhaps. Go over the rules and figure out what's up. I don't know. The newspapers are filled with explainers now about how these things will happen. But we did get to see Nancy Pelosi fulfilling her role in that, and as you said, pointed out, signing her name. This has got to be the most annoying thing for presidents and speakers of the House who occasionally have to do this. But you have to sign these things one letter at a time so that you can give out souvenir pens. I have one of the pens used to sign. It's usually a bill that's becoming law, and usually a big deal bill. This one, I don't know, it was almost a little unseemly. I'm sure that upset Republicans greatly that people wanted souvenir pens from the impeachment of the president. But this president really sucks.
Fox News handled it well. Maria Bartiromo, while everybody else was talking about Lev Parnas, showed pictures of the pens and said, they look like bullet casings to me.
Wow, that's weird. You're a crazy lady.
So,
I mean, I see what she's talking about.
Service should investigate that.
Pens.
I think, but, that's another story.
They were trying to. I saw people reacting to that, and it looked like they were trying to insinuate that the Secret Service ought to be investigating Nancy Pelosi because she was using such bullet-like pens on a document that was clearly anti-Trump, and this was some sort of secret assassination message. I mean, it's what pens look like. Sorry.
Right. So maybe we should do some more hot takes on how Nancy Pelosi lost everything, according to Chris Elizabeth, by waiting.
Right. Well, he's probably getting a raise right now.
I would think, for being just so insightful. Yeah. But that's how things roll in this town, right?
Yeah.
Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
Okay. Let's try that. Let's good. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Try some golf. Okay. Well, let's see. I won't be playing any golf this weekend. It was cold anyway, although it's not as cold as it's supposed to be because planet heating up. But I got a work-filled weekend coming up once again. And at some point, I'm going to have to watch this Lev Parnas interview in its entirety. Last night wasn't the good time for me to do that. Most nights, not really a terrific time for me. So I miss most television and have to watch it later on. But I'll already be an hour behind. Even if I watch the hour tonight, I'll be another hour behind. There's no way I'm going to do 2 hours. Now that I've said there's no way, I'm pretty sure it's going to accidentally happen. But anyway, much to catch up on. I understand we had a brief power outage for those of you listening live. For those of you listening as a podcast, you will never have noticed this, but if you're listening live via Stitcher, via the Netroots radio stream directly, via other things that were used, or I don't even know what services we're on anymore. No one can tell. Everything's out of your control once you put it on the internet, as you know. But we had a brief power outage at Justice Putnam's end of the spectrum there at the, not Kagro in the Morning World headquarters, but Netroots Radio World headquarters, which is Pacific Northwesty kind of an operation. And there's a snowstorm going on. And sometimes that interrupts things, but I guess we were off the air briefly, back on. While you were gone, the president was impeached, and nasal perv Lev Parnas, I hope you didn't miss that part, has flipped on, or apparently flipped on everybody, and implicated everybody under the sun on Rachel Maddow. I know that wasn't the part that we dropped out on, but who knows when we actually went out and what you missed. The point is, everybody you thought was guilty is guilty, and little by little we're able to prove it even to skeptics, and then it's a question of whether or not Senate Republicans either just don't care or do care and are sweating profusely, but think that their best chance for their survival is to pretend either that they don't care or that they're simply unpersuaded. And no indication that that has changed. However, things are happening that, might make it spiral out of their control. One thing that we might have dropped out on was the information coming out of Ukraine right now that we do, in fact, finally have, as a result of Donald Trump's pushing, we do finally have an investigation underway in Ukraine of corruption of certain American figures, but it's not the one they were looking for. And I think that that's just something that you're going to have to expect if you press a anti-corruption regime, or at least a new regime that's been elected on the platform of anti-corruption, to please help you corruptly investigate fake corruption for your own corrupt purposes. They're going to drag their feet in helping you out, and that will frustrate you, and you will do dumb things like have lunatics surveil the U.S. ambassador in Ukraine and possibly threaten to kill her. And what you have in the end is the Ukrainian government opening its own investigation into whether or not this surveillance was actually happening, who was involved. Because remember, what Hyde was intimating, I guess, was that that he had people inside a private security firm that was contracting with, I guess, the U.S. Embassy for security, and that contact was going to make it possible to arrange for a breach in security, or were going to do the deed themselves in doing whatever it is to Yovanovitch, or at the very least that they were at that time feeding Hyde information about her whereabouts. Whether or not it was accurate, I don't know. Whether or not it was legitimate, I don't know. But the Ukrainian government, I guess, wants to know, are there operators in Ukraine offering what, appears to be legitimate security services to allies, or, for that matter, to foes, but to the international community. They'll want to know whether there are people offering security services to embassy staffs, foreign embassy staffs, who are in fact double agents, bribable, whatever, and involving themselves in these nefarious activities. So they'll be investigating that. And one, that's an unintended consequence of your stupid plan, for one thing. And for another, it's kind of their enthusiasm, such as it may be, for conducting such an investigation might have been less than it would otherwise had you not been pestering them to break their campaign promise of working towards anti-corruption. You make them look bad. They put Zelensky in a terrible position, and he was sweating it horribly. And he really didn't know what to do. Because, and you can understand this, first of all, he's not an experienced politician necessarily, but he gets elected on this anti-corruption message, and he's really trying to do right by the people of Ukraine who have been battered and buffeted by Russian corruption and Russian aggression all this time. And here he is, he's been elected to do right by the people, and the first thing he's presented with is, you can't do right by your people in terms of defense against Russia unless you do wrong by your people in terms of a fake corruption investigation. You have to stand all of your promises, election promises, on their heads in order to be able to deliver on the most basic promise to your people of, I will help defend you. I'll be there with you and do everything I can to defend you against Russian aggression. And I'm sure that it troubled him greatly. I can't drop this obligation in order to save face on a campaign promise. As basic as that campaign promise was, certainly the obligation to defend Ukraine from Russian aggression is even greater. So, all right, I'll drag my feet. And I'm sure once he's probably greatly relieved to find out that American authorities were understood what was going on and we're going to make some effort to do something about it, even if we couldn't, really believe that it would end in the removal of Donald Trump from office, that the political pressure the impeachment created would relieve the pressure on Zelensky. But now offer him a clear opportunity to turn the tables, to twist the knife a little bit once someone else plunges it in on Trump himself. He's going to take it. You know what I mean? He was greatly troubled by this scheme that Trump was running. And now he's got an opportunity to investigate legitimately something that will cause enormous PR problems publicly, domestically, internationally for Trump, and he's going to do it. So I'm glad to see this investigation underway. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know whether they really anticipate getting any help from the American FBI on that, but they might make that request of the FBI attaché in Ukraine, and I have no idea what their response is going to be. I'm sure they'll get some sort of directive from Bill Barr not to cooperate. We'll see whether they agree, whether they enforce that request from Barr, or whether Barr is on top of it enough to get rid of people who look like they're cooperating. But another important point in all of this, of course, depending on how serious the investigation is to the Ukrainians and how important it is to them to keep it going, they may make a real problem here. And despite his belief that he can do anything he wants as president, this is one of those few places where Trump pardons can't work. You can't pardon a suspect in a crime against Ukrainian law. That you could try. I mean, he might even go right out and say it. I pardon you. And, dumb people might even believe that. They can't prosecute him, but that's Ukraine. It's a different country. What? No, it isn't. You don't understand how countries work, et cetera, et cetera. We'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, yes, will we hear from John Bolton? I don't know. Random news. John Bolton isn't even in the United States at the moment, I don't think, because yesterday, for some reason, circulating throughout Twitter was what appeared to be a random person's street video, cell phone video out the window of their cars. They're driving down the street in Doha, in the United Arab Emirates, and John Bolton is just walking around. He's not with anybody. He's not got armed guards with him or anything. He's not walking with other people in business suits and briefcases and chatting intently. It's just walking down the street in a sweater, by the way, in Doha. I don't know what the temperature was in Doha the other day, but long pants and a button-down shirt and a sweater over it, and maybe it gets cool in Doha, and maybe it was just a lousy day or it's early in the morning. I don't know, but it certainly seems to be him. This is a tweet from Haya Al-Thani, who I don't know anything about this person, although I know that's the handle that they've attached with. The actual address is Haya, which certainly appears to be their name, Haya Al-Thani. And the address is Haya BNT Alaweed, which is that's a name I recognize. She now identifies, I think, herself. I can't tell. There's a picture. The avatar is of a person in graduation garb, and it says here that they would have been, I guess, graduating from either Georgetown or Harvard, according to this profile. And you know how people decorate their graduation, the mortarboard, the cap. that goes with their cap gun. This has got the square one on here, so they're getting their bachelor's degree, I guess, from Georgetown. And they've decorated it with some rather ornate Arabic calligraphy here. And Haya identifies herself, perhaps, as avid reader, independent thinker, Georgetown and Harvard, international politics and Arab studies, against any and all forms of racism, sexism, tribalism, and classism. Based, apparently, in Doha. Oh, I'm sorry, in Qatar. Doha is in Qatar, not the United Arab Emirates. So my mistake there. But, so this picture, I can't tell whether she took the video or she just got the video from somewhere else and is tweeting it around. But Haya is an Al-Walid, which isn't that a princely name in the region? I do believe that that's come up once or twice. I don't know whether that makes for a familial relationship there or not, or maybe they're all named that there. I have no idea. But at any rate, she's tweeting around this video and just saying, you guys, is this John Bolton spotted just casually walking around, I don't know, I guess the name of the street area or the neighborhood, Al Masila area in Doha, and just sort of with a little laughter emoji, but damn if it isn't John Bolton. And some of the first responses to the video where this is obviously a fake. Of course it's not him. He wouldn't just be walking around there. But no, apparently confirmed he is actually there for one reason or another. Not certain what the reason would be. But I'll tell you this, Doha is not the United States, and if that trial is starting next week, I mean, it's just a plane ride away, I guess. But I'd be curious to know whether he's got any tickets booked to return to the United States. And if not, that might tell you something about what the chances of his being called as a witness really are in his mind. So we'll see. I guess if he's voluntarily making his way back to the United States, then we can take him at his word that he was willing to testify. And if he's going to hang out in Qatar during the entirety of the trial, well, then that's your answer about his intentions right there. But we'll have to wait and see, as Greg always tells us. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Now what the hell should we be doing? Oh, okay. Well, let's see. Are we off the air again? Mighty OCD says, wants to know who broke my KITM feed. Are we just late on that reaction, or is it snowing even worse in the Pacific Northwest? Bear with us. We'll be making the podcast available, of course. And if you are one of the affected listeners right now, you have no idea. So what's the difference? But this is me talking to you in the past, but in your future, when you listen on the podcast, it's all going to be okay. Gosh, we have a lot to catch up on. And let's see. Let me open Pocket and remind myself of the things I wanted to tell you about. Open up Twitter again and make sure I have all of those things. And in the middle of all of this, Kate Sherrill has about 15 things that we want to share. And let's see if we can't make short work of some of them. First, we'll go to the last thing she sent me here. More bad news for the administration, she says. Kyle Cheney tweeting this out. Breaking. It's breaking news, so look out. Don't cut yourself on any of the sharp edges. Kyle Cheney says, the GAO, the General Accounting Office, concludes that the White House Budget Office, the OMB, violated the law by withholding military aid from Ukraine. It's almost as if we told you correctly what the situation was on that front. Kyle's retweeting Senator Chris Van Hollen's note that this bombshell legal opinion from the independent U.S. GAO, which, by the way, was of no effing help whatsoever on the emoluments question, and even before getting to the emoluments question centered around the Trump International Hotel in Washington, they blew it and were no effing help on the very plain and easy to solve question of whether or not Donald Trump ought to have been allowed to have that lease. But never mind all of that. Now the GAO says that this that their letter demonstrates without a doubt, according to Chris Van Hollen, that the Trump administration illegally withheld assistance from Ukraine, and the public evidence shows that the president himself ordered this illegal act. Yes, that's true. We speculated that it was based on an awful lot of pretty solid evidence. Yes. So Scott tells me too that our stream is out again. It's just bad weather up there in the Pacific Northwest, and there's nothing we can do about it. This is why we tape this thing for you, and we'll put it out in just a few minutes. I'll try and rush the podcast to publication for you. But the GAO, looking into this thing, we knew it when we saw it, and it's an impeachable offense all by itself. At least it's tied up in the articles of impeachment that actually got forwarded to the Senate yesterday, after a while, but not too long compared to previous impeachments. Well, let's take a look at this. But we can grab the letter. Well, what we have here is a one-page look at this thing. Oh, we're going to have to get real close to the screen on this one. All right, let's adjust the mic and bear down on this one. Let's see. This issued just today, January 16th, so it really is breaking stuff. In the summer of 2019, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, withheld from obligation funds appropriated to the Department of Defense, DoD, for security assistance to Ukraine. That's highlighted. There's a little bit more here. In order to withhold the funds, OMB issued a series of 9 apportionment schedules with footnotes that made all unobligated balances unavailable for obligation. Faithful execution of the laws does not permit the president to substitute his own policy priorities for those that Congress has enacted into law. OMB withheld funds for a policy reason, which is not permitted under the Impoundment Control Act, or ICA. The withholding was not a programmatic delay. Therefore, we conclude that OMB violated the ICA, which, unsurprisingly, is pretty much what we concluded for you, and we dug down into the details of that some weeks ago. The decision follows, but I guess it's more than a one-page document, so I guess it doesn't really pay to read you the decision. But the highlighted parts that Chris Van Hollen has sent around is, this happened, and therefore we conclude the OMB violated the ICA. They did, as I said, it's impeachable all by itself. What I mean by that, of course, is it's a violation of the law and a violation, therefore, of the presidential oath to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. And it's, even if you don't feel like it follows because, it's not like a murder law. It's a technicality. It's a technical law about spending money and who gets to do what. Well, this all comes back down to the whole thing where you were taught that the Congress has the power of the purse. And the president said, I don't want them to have the power of the purse. I want to have the power of the purse. And he usurped that power, which is illegal. And ordinarily, I don't know what the penalty is. So let's say the, Secretary of State decided to do that for some reason. And he doesn't enjoy the protections thanks to the OLC memo that you can't indict a sitting Secretary of State. You can. You can indict a sitting president too, but they decided to say that you couldn't. And we believe that for some reason. Anyway, he doesn't enjoy the same protections, and so you could indict the Secretary of State, I guess, and I don't know if there's any provision for criminal penalties for violating that law. Probably not, but you'd be subject to something, I guess, even if we couldn't figure out exactly what the remedy was. The president, though, unindictable, I guess the other edge of the double-edged sword of the OLC memo, if you can't indict a sitting president, but the president is not above the law, then you're left with the blunt instrument of impeachment. All you can do is impeach a president who flouts the law because you don't have available to you the usual remedies under law. You got to impeach the person in order to render them subject to the law, because now you got to impeach and remove them so that they're no longer a sitting president. It is a blunt instrument. It is, in some cases, sledgehammer to a fly, but that's, it's not necessary that you always pull the trigger on those things. It's supposed to be by by the normal design, enough to threaten the president with impeachment. And then he becomes embarrassed and pulls back away and does whatever he can in seeking to avoid the embarrassment of impeachment. Not this guy. So you're just going to have to go ahead and do it. So that's rough stuff. But thanks, Kate, for sending that one along. Pretty much as we told you here some weeks ago. But I'm glad to see that sort of vindication. All right, so let's see. What should I pocket in order to share with you? I guess the Van Hollen tweet will do the trick on that one. So let's make sure that is properly filed so that we can find it for you later. Okay, let's see. Other items for current consideration. Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay, well, that one we'll hold for later. But earlier in the show, she also sent along a link to the book that Greg and I were making mention of. The new book is A Very Stable Genius, and for a while it was what everyone was talking about yesterday because, of course, it gives you all the good red meat about Donald Trump being a chowder-headed boob, and so it was widely discussed. New book portrays Trump as erratic, and then in quotes here, at times dangerously uninformed. Normally something super juicy, and we would love to read all the way through it and read about the funniest and or saddest or scariest bits about it. And they include fun things here in this Ashley Parker write-up of the book as what's up here at the top. President Trump reveals himself as woefully uninformed about the basics of geography, incorrectly telling Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, do I pronounce that right? Narendra, maybe? Or Narendra Modi. It's not like you've got China on your border. He toys with awarding himself the Medal of Freedom, among other dumb things. And according to a new book by Washington Post reporters Philip Rucker and Carol Leonig, Trump does not seem to grasp the fundamental history surrounding the attack on Pearl Harbor. Really? Hey, John, what's all this about? What's this a tour of? Trump asks his then Chief of Staff, John F. Kelly, as the men prepare to take a private tour of the USS Arizona Memorial, which commemorates the December 1941 Japanese surprise attack in the Pacific that pulled the United States into World War II. Trump had heard the phrase Pearl Harbor and appeared to understand that he was visiting the scene of a historic battle, but he did not seem to know much else, write the authors, later quoting a former senior White House advisor who concludes, he was at times dangerously uninformed. So, the book is 417 pages of nuggets like this, including, let's see, some of the other things that were shared yesterday. I don't even remember what people were talking about yesterday. I mean, they're really great ones, but I think maybe we can leave it for Friday consumption, unless we hit a wall with what else is in pocket, but I can't imagine that could possibly be the case. To follow up on and give you the source that I had on the Epstein story. I was pretty sure, there we are. There's the Miami Herald story on it. I have a New York Times piece on it and Miami Herald, but let's go with Miami Herald on this one. Just so you're up to date and I can mention it and include it in the roundup here. Virgin Islands alleged Jeffrey Epstein trafficked girls as young as 12. Oh, we're up to 12 now. It was 11 yesterday. 12 now. As recently as 2018. A lawsuit filed Wednesday, just yesterday, by the top law enforcement officer in the U.S. Virgin Islands alleges that the multimillionaire financier, he's no longer a billionaire, right? Multimillionaire financier Jeffrey Epstein sexually trafficked hundreds of young girls, women and girls, on his private island, some as recently as 2018, aided by a web of shell companies to carry out and conceal his crimes. The allegations, if validated, broaden the scope of Epstein's sexual trafficking and shed new light on the tactics Epstein used to hide his illicit activities. The lawsuit seeks forfeiture of the islands, valued by managers of Epstein's estate at more than $86 million, because of their use in alleged crimes. This lawsuit focuses on conduct that happened here in the Virgin Islands in violation of Virgin Islands law, Attorney General Denise George. So it's the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands working on this one. So again, Denise George. Take note of the name. The conduct described in our complaint betrays the deepest principles and values of the government and the people of the Virgin Islands. Epstein, of course, found dead in his Manhattan jail cell last August 10th. Lots of controversy swirling around that one. As you know, I don't think we made mention of the latest twist on that, even though we all probably saw the news, that apparently, they accidentally erased the videotape of his first suicide attempt. I guess he didn't succeed in his first suicide attempt. But, it's nonsense, again, just sort of unbelievable coincidence, if you believe in that, or ridiculous cover-up, if you believe in that. I don't know which one's the harder to believe, quite honestly. Anyway, he's dead, and that part is true. And it says here, he's allegedly brought girls as young as 11 to his private island. I don't know where the disconnect between 11 and 12 comes, but that's not important. And brought them to this little St. James private island and maintained a database to track their availability and movements, which is also, horrible and weird and disgusting. And as I recall, there was a lot of discussion yesterday on Twitter. I mean, this is also an extraordinarily long piece here and deserves more attention, but I just wanted to make sure that we got it on record here, that people were talking about that it was as crazy as the 15-year-old girl at some point, like running off and trying to swim to safety, and that they, Epstein organized a search party to go and essentially recapture her as though she were a runaway slave, which is, I guess, pretty much exactly how they regarded her in that. And the hyperbole is not overstated because, remember that a good part of the actual slave trade back in the actual slave days was entirely about that. We talk about that from time to time here, that one of the, for some reason, least discussed, because it's super uncomfortable, I guess, least discussed aspects of that peculiar institution of the old American South is that sex slavery was an explicit part, and it was understood to be an explicit part of the slave trade. And boy, can we normalize anything in this country or what? That's your American exceptionalism. We can normalize anything. Wow. Okay, so it totally deserves a read through. I don't know if we're ever going to get to it. News is just piling up far too quickly. All right, let's see. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not. The Virginia General Assembly yesterday, both houses of the General Assembly, I guess General Assembly sometimes refers to the House of Delegates, but also now the entirety of the body, passed a resolution purporting, we hope it's more than just purporting, but we're stuck legally at this point, purporting to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution, to the United States Constitution. Virginia, one of the few states that, several, I guess, that held out on that for whatever reason. And now we face a legal question, a constitutional question. Apparently, I don't know why they did this. Maybe it was designed to fail. That must have been it. But apparently when the Equal Rights Amendment was originally circulated to the states for ratification, it went along with a message from Congress attaching an expiration date to it. That, in other words, if the requisite number of states did not ratify by a date certain, then the amendment should be considered a dead letter. But ignoring that, Virginia went ahead and passed it. And I don't know whether other states have done anything in the interim or whether we were stuck at one more state that was necessary. But at any rate, what happened is, had there not been an expiration date purportedly attached, Virginia's action yesterday would put us over the top and would ratify the amendment. And now we'll have a constitutional battle in front of Trump's Supreme Court eventually. But maybe it won't get there before we're rid of Trump. And the Trump name is discredited, and all the people who were appointed by him, probably not having been removed from office, but will have this taint on their records. We'll see whether it matters to them. Anyway, at some point the Supreme Court will have to decide, is it even a legit thing for the Congress to attach an expiration date? Is that something they can do, should be allowed to do? If they did they do so properly, might become a question. Was enough time, was a reasonable amount of time contemplated? I don't know. We have ratified amendments to the Constitution in processes that have taken over 200 years before. So what was it, the 27th Amendment that was originally proposed? I'm going to run away and go get running away to go get the Constitution here, but the 27th, am I right about this amendment? Originally proposed along with the original draft of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all the amendments that went along with it, but not adopted, not ratified by the requisite number of states until 1992, for whatever reason. No law varying the compensation for the services of senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. In other words, an amendment designed to make it unconstitutional for the Congress to vote to raise its own salary immediately. You can vote to raise congressional salary, but that raise won't kick in until the next election shall have intervened, as they like to say. And that was ratified in 1992. I remember that happening and saying, wow, I didn't know that there was an original amendment from the founders still hanging out there awaiting ratification, nor that you could do it over so long a period. But the argument will be that did not come with an expiration date attached to it, and that the argument will be that Congress was within its rights to attach such restrictions to the circulation of the amendment for ratification, and so therefore Virginia's act may be an empty one. It's certainly a valuable symbolic one. There's no skin off anyone's nose here. We haven't lost anything by ratifying this. If anything, we reinvigorate the process, and we might find a new amendment circulated in the near future, either in reaction to a ruling from the Supreme Court invalidating the current action, or perhaps ahead of time to raise the pressure on the Supreme Court. I don't know. We'll see how that one works out. But we had to notify our audience of that having happened, and now that sets the stage for asking the question of whether there was any relationship. I don't think that there is one, but it certainly would have looked terrible had this gone forward. Virginia declares a state of emergency after armed militias threatened to storm the Capitol. Now, I don't believe that it had anything to do with the Equal Rights Amendment, but it would have happened close enough in time that it might have been taken as being related. This is some serious stuff here. Tess Owen, I have her story reporting for Vice News. The governor said law enforcement had intercepted extremist rhetoric similar to the lead up to Charlottesville, which was also, of course, in Virginia, and still is, days before pro-gun activists are holding a rally. So it's about guns, but, whenever these people, these crazies in particular, show up in their protests of guns, it's not often far removed from misogynist intent all by itself. So it's not crazy that you might see a connection. In response to what he described as credible evidence of threats of violence at an upcoming gun rights rally in Richmond, Virginia, Governor Ralph Northam has declared a state of emergency and will temporarily ban individuals from carrying firearms on Capitol grounds. The governor said at a press conference Wednesday that authorities believed armed militia groups planned to storm the Capitol. We're not even really sure what that means. Storm the Capitol. And they may even have used that language. And that could mean anything from, seriously storm the Capitol, take it over by armed force, or simply lots and lots of us come with our guns to try to get in to meet with our representatives and tell them how much we love our guns And we like to call it storming the Capitol, but we don't know. But this was all planned for January 20th, which is, let's see, today's the 16th, tomorrow's the 17th, 18, 19, 20th. Yes, January 20th would be Monday, which isn't that is it MLK Day on Monday? Yeah. That would be in keeping with the spirit of these types of people, certainly, to mark January 20th that way. Of course, January 20th has other significance out there as well. It's not Inauguration Day this year, but it will be Inauguration Day next year. It's also, as I recall, January 20th was the date that they chose for Gun Appreciation Day back in 2013, almost immediately following the shootings of 1214, as they call them, up in Greg's neck of the woods in Newtown. But that was the day, January 20th, that they chose for Gun Appreciation Day, and also the day that Gunfail was born, because there were those 3 separate accidental shootings at gun shows on that very same day. Anyway, January 20th was the date of their planned rally. The governor also said that law enforcement had intercepted threats and extremist rhetoric similar to what was observed prior to the violent Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in August of 2017. We will not allow that mayhem and violence to happen here, he said. The decision to ban all weapons, including firearms, won't sit well with the thousands of gun lovers who are expected to descend on Richmond to participate in what was billed as an open carry affair and an opportunity to flex Second Amendment rights. No weapons will be allowed on Capitol grounds, said Northam, a Democrat, and they note for convenience here. Everything from sticks and bats to chains and projectiles, and that's important because very often these guys show up in catcher's equipment, essentially. They show up in makeshift armor, carrying signs attached to sticks that the signs are only superfluous. They really intend to tear the signs off and beat people with the sticks later on, or flags stapled to baseball bats and say, "It's a flagpole. What are you doing?" So, everything from sticks and bats to chains and projectiles. The list also includes firearms. It makes no sense to ban every other weapon but allow firearms when intelligence shows that armed militia groups plan to storm the Capitol. You're right, it doesn't. This is very sensible. Quite honestly, they should be doing this all the time. Every time there's one of these rallies, and they should be banning the sticks and everything. And the gun thing is a particularly weird, stupid loophole that we have. I have seen recently, I don't think we talked about it, but I retweeted and just, unrelated to the show, retweeted a comment that I saw pointing out that every once in a while you have one of these pro-gun rallies and they come to the state capitol, and so everybody makes a point in those rallies of wearing their AR-15s openly at the Capitol, which was pointed out in this tweet that I shared with everybody, particularly ridiculous, given that this person was saying, I'm a teacher, and it was in one of those states where we had those massive teacher protests / rallies at the capital of our state. And we were searched meticulously, and we were told, you can't even bring a protest sign on a stick because you might be able to use that stick as a weapon, even though at no point had any state had danger from protesting teachers that they were going to beat state legislators with sticks. Nobody had even joked that was a possibility. And they prevented them from doing that. And you couldn't they searched your purse, and you couldn't bring in, more than 3-ounce bottle of water or whatever it was. They were taking snacks and water bottles from people for fear that they would somehow be used in some assault or assassination attempt. But there was suddenly, all of a sudden, because guns are such a touchy subject and people are so beholden to the NRA, there was allegedly nothing we could do under state law to stop people from marching into the Capitol with AR-15s strapped on. But no, you're going to have your lunch confiscated if you're a teacher. So at least this is a sensible response to this possible threat. And I don't know how long do you have to wait to find out whether a threat like that is credible before you say, yeah, you can't just march through the Capitol with weapons. Sorry. On the Facebook page for the rally, Several attendees are already saying they won't comply and leave their weapons at home, so that should be fun and interesting as well. It's big talk. We'll see whether they really do it. Even though Richmond Mayor LeVar Stoney has vowed a hard line on rule breakers. Violations of the law will not be tolerated, Stoney said, and as you know, these people are chiefly about law and order, if nothing else, right? The January 20th event, dubbed Lobby Day, was organized by the Virginia Citizens Defense League, a pro-Second Amendment nonprofit, in response to new gun control legislation introduced by the Democratic state legislature. Northam acknowledged that the organizers had been planning the rally for some time. I believe them when they say this is a peaceful event. That's what democracy is, said Northam. Unfortunately, they've unleashed something much larger, something they may not be able to control. We see it coming, and we're going to do something about it. Good call. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio, and let's see. What else can we cram in for today? There are other bits and pieces of the news. There's more to the Vice story, but suffice to say, I think we've gotten to the meat of it, and it makes good sense for the governor of Virginia to have the warning sign of Charlottesville under his belt and not take precautions given what they're seeing by way of chatter on right-wing websites, in this case, would be negligence. So he's doing the right thing here. And good. The fact that it frustrates gun rights protesters is just a bonus, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Let's see. Here's some other information that I thought I might share with you. I happened across this tweet the other day. Did I save the tweet or just the article? That I think the important part is the article, so I saved that. You'll probably enjoy this one, just in case you were wondering. From Roll Call, although I see we're going to have some pop-up troubles obscuring the article. Here we go. Even after the Senate trial begins, and I guess that's imminent, the House could still add more impeachment articles. And it's good to know, because there are so many that we could be adding, and it might make some sense, given the GAO opinion, for instance, to add an impeachment article to this trial, since it does focus on Ukraine. I mean, the heart of the impeachment articles that have just been transmitted are about the nature of the quid pro quo and the use of government. Well, as I put it in my bumper sticker, the use of governmental power for personal benefit, right? And the fact that we also now have, and we already knew this was the case, but we now have the letter from Giuliani stressing that he's there in his capacity as Trump's personal attorney. Personal attorney, what does a personal attorney do? He pursues personal benefits for his client. Personal attorney, personal benefit. Personal benefit arising from the use of the force of the United States government is corruption by definition. So all the elements are there. That's really all you need, in addition to an honest jury. But that's all you would need to close the case normally. Personal attorney, personal benefit. Personal benefit, corruption. The end. That's all that really needs to be said. But yes, the conclusion of the GAO ought to be added to all of this. even without a quid pro quo involved, it's impeachable by itself because, again, you're breaking the law and therefore, and doing so intentionally and knowingly and against advice from the State Department, from the Pentagon, from the lawyers, etc., etc. But breaking the law and therefore breaking the oath of office and impeachable all by itself. And with GAO's conclusion, it makes it awfully difficult to argue that that's not the case. But they should add that. And you can. This, according to Niels Lesniewski's write-up in Roll Call, even after the Senate trial begins, the House could still add more impeachment articles. A 1936 impeachment of a Florida federal judge, of course. And what part of Florida? It's relevant but not important. The 1936 impeachment of a Florida federal judge outlines the process for adding new charges. And, let me read it, and then we'll comment on it a little bit. House Democrats are preparing to send 2 articles of impeachment, they've now done it, against President Donald Trump to the Senate, but they still could add more even after the Senate trial begins. If the House managers appointed next week found evidence, and they've now been appointed, found evidence to support articles of impeachment, additional articles of impeachment against the president, whether from potential witness testimony on the Senate floor or through other means, they could march back across the Capitol and seek an amended impeachment article resolution on the House floor. While there is no reason to suspect House Democrats would add new charges, now you do, a precedent referenced in Jefferson's manual, I keep telling you that's an important book, from the 1936 judicial impeachment of Halstead L. Ritter, who had been a federal judge based in, you'll never guess, Palm Beach County, Florida, Mar-a-Lago, appears to give them that power. On March 2nd, 1936, the House adopted 4 articles of impeachment against Ritter, including on allegations that he had continued the practice of law after joining the federal bench. The House worked through procedural steps to prepare for the impeachment trial for the rest of the week, and the Senate received the House impeachment managers the following Tuesday. But as outlined in the congressional record, that was not the end of the House's work. Having discovered additional evidence, including more clarity about the scope of Ritter's continued private legal work, as well as evidence of income tax evasion, by the way, the House managers sought to update the charges against the Florida judge. House Judiciary Chairman Hatton W. Sumners, you've got to love the names, Democrat of Texas, brought a new privileged impeachment resolution on the House floor on March 30th. The resolution proposed amending some of the original articles. It also proposed 3 new articles, 1 regarding his legal practice and 2 about the tax issues. Summers said during the floor debate that the proposed amendments came from the House managers rather than from the Judiciary Committee. Asked by House Minority Leader Bertrand Snell of New York whether it would be proper for the committee to take up the new articles, Sumners said that wasn't the case. I do not think it is at all necessary for this reason. And again, here the question is, asked by the House Minority Leader whether it would be proper for the committee, the Judiciary Committee, to take up the new articles. Sumners says, I don't think it's going to be necessary for this reason. The managers, I love these technicalities, the managers are now acting as the agents of the House, not as agents of the Committee on the Judiciary, Sumners said. During the same floor debate, he explained that the changes were not all prompted by facts not previously in evidence, but that appeared to be the source of most of the updates in the charges sent to the Senate. Perhaps it would not be true to answer that entirely in the affirmative, but the changes are made largely by reason of new evidence, which has come to the attention of the committee, and some of the changes, more or less changes in form, have resulted from further examination of the question, he said. This is somewhat as lawyers do in their pleadings. They often ask the privilege of making an amendment. The resolution to amend the articles of impeachment was ultimately adopted by voice vote, as was a resolution directing the House clerk to notify the Senate of the amended charges, as well as of the House's grant of authority of managers to present exhibits about the new material. The record of the Ritter case shows that House members did not intend to introduce entirely new crimes into the Senate trial after it had already started, But the precedent set would not seem to preclude that either. I intend to let this go through, but I do not want a practice established here which is wrong. That is, that this House informally, without notice and without consideration, vote on new specific charges on which a man is to be tried in the Senate, said Michigan GOP Representative Earl Michener. Ritter was ultimately convicted in the Senate on only one of the 7 counts presented against him, but that was enough to remove him from office on April 16th, 1936. So, important, useful precedent. It should not come as a surprise that, pretty much these sovereign bodies can pretty much ratify their right to do just about anything they want. But yeah, if you have a majority in the House and you can get these things considered on the floor over the objections, valid or otherwise, of the minority, and you style them as additional articles of impeachment and dispatch them to the Senate has very little choice. Although, again, I suppose that someone could make a motion that the Senate somehow reject these things as being improper in form, and if you can muster 51 votes to support that proposition, you might be able to get away with it at least temporarily. Although with the Chief Justice in attendance, that does make it a little bit dicey. Not that they can't also overrule him, but that's just, that's going to be a real interesting feature of this trial. If at any point Mitch McConnell has to try to muster 51 votes to overrule the Chief Justice of the United States, especially on a matter that appears to most observers as being a matter of law, it's just going to be very interesting and very uncomfortable for them to have to do, although I don't doubt their ability to do it or their intention to do it. But I'm not certain how this one comes out. If they're styled as additional articles of impeachment, I don't know that the Senate has much choice in what to do with it. They can try and create some choice for themselves by simply rejecting it outright. Those things, they could try to dismiss those charges outright, as they had originally threatened to do with this one, but backed off of. Another separate question is whether or not they would add these articles to this trial. I guess I'm not terribly torn up if we got to this point. I wouldn't be terribly torn up if the Senate said, we refuse to acknowledge that these additional articles of impeachment are to be tried at the same proceeding. Okay, we'll have another one right afterwards. That's fine with me. Let's, by all means, conclude this trial and then put you right back into another one. Are you sure you don't want to consolidate this? Because I would think they would want to. Republicans, their initial desire, I'm sure, would be to just say, libs want this and we want to own them, so no. Upon further thought, they might say, yeah, well, we can dismiss these charges or dispense with them in the same 2-week window and not have anybody come to understand that there's an additional crime charged in all this. We should do that. So I imagine that they would do. I think they could get those by. And quite honestly, I think that that's something they should seriously consider right now. This GAO letter is a golden opportunity to do it. They're not always listening to me. Some of my suggestions are better than others. Some are actually just actively bad suggestions. Like, for instance, I suggested the other day or yesterday when Nancy Pelosi was signing the impeachment resolutions on their way, to send them over to the House and going through the ceremonial signing, that she ought to, after having finished the signature, taking 20 minutes to do it with one letter per pen, etc. But when you finally get the signature onto the resolution, you may have seen circulated on Twitter yesterday, somebody took a picture of the resolutions, printed out on the parchment and in the little folders and stuff with the nice, neat little blue ribbons in the corner holding them in, just like a bill signing. Well, it is just like a bill signing. I was going to say sign it like a bill signing for the president, ignoring that, there's actually a bill signing procedure for the Speaker of the House as well. So she's frequently signing these things. these little blue folders. But you see Trump signing them all the time and having a big ceremony over it. It's usually a bigger deal when the president signs a bill. But then, instituting his new stupid-looking practice of turning the thing around and showing it off to the assembled press. I thought it would have been hilarious for her to finish her signature on that thing and then turn it around and show it like Trump does. But then everybody reminded me, well, she's above that. It would be highly improper, but still very funny. And I opt for the funny on that one. I mean, we'd say it's beneath her, but I don't know. She seemed to enjoy that sarcastic clap thing at the State of the Union, and maybe she considers that a moment of weakness that she's not particularly proud of, but I would have gone with it. I wish I had gotten that suggestion to her earlier. Are you kidding me? That would be the biggest trolling in the world. It'd be fantastic. But, yeah, I mean, I guess they were worried about, Republicans reacted already badly at the pens, or the fact that she smiled at some point inadvertently during the signing ceremony. But I would have risked it, because that's the kind of guy I am. Me for Speaker of the House. You don't have to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House. I say they slip me into that role. I'll troll Republicans mercilessly until I'm such a huge embarrassment you can't help but get rid of me. That is my promise to you, the American people. All right. Let's see. Where else should we go in order to be comprehensive today? Yes. How about this one? I noticed yesterday Natasha Bertrand tweeting about an Intercept story that I guess was the source. It was the Intercept story that was, I guess that supplemented our understanding of what Robert Hyde was doing with his surveillance, his alleged surveillance of Marie Yovanovitch in Kyiv. And it's Lee Fang is the writer on the piece, so we're familiar with Lee. And I think it was Lee's piece that, I'm not even certain, but either Lee's piece or someone else's, but everyone was pointing out, there were several sources, for instance, on Hyde's removal from Doral in May for this mental health incident, and a couple other. So I'm skimming to see whether this was a source, because I'm reading as I'm skimming through it. There's a lot of verbiage here that we would go through in a complete reading, but that we already know, and that I think would be a waste of our time. But maybe the better thing to do is to thumb through my own Twitter feed from yesterday, but just to find the proof of it. But the upshot of my following of the situation on Twitter yesterday was that somewhere along the line it was pointed out that in addition to the very, very many photographs of Robert Hyde with Trump, with almost every member of his family, Eric, Don Jr., Ivanka, and Tiffany, mysteriously, so far, we have not seen, for whatever reason, in addition to the child who shall not be named, no picture with Melania, no pictures with his sister, certainly, I don't know, or any of his other sisters, but the immediate Trump family is compromised with all those stupid pictures. But they were also pointing out that Hyde ended up in attendance at the World Series, seated in the president's luxury box. It's not his box, but whatever box he was seated in, where all the other important personages and celebrities were. And I don't know how big those boxes are. It may be that they're filled with random people all the time. But Hyde, this supposedly peripheral figure, somehow manages to end up in the box. I mean, those have got to be coveted seats, right? How do you sweet talk your way into one of those and then deny any knowledge of or connection to somebody like Hyde? That's extraordinarily difficult to do. It's a big lie, is what it is. But what I was interested in pointing out here, and as other people, I guess, were hinting at, and I just picked up the ball and ran with it, is you got a real problem here now that we know more about Hyde and who he was. Fang's reporting and perhaps some other sources that I've put away as well tell us, for instance, that Hyde is a repeat offender when it comes to stalking. Now, of course, we first find out about him stalking or virtually stalking or having someone else stalk Marie Yovanovitch, but he's got his own stalking legal problems by himself. So let's see. I think I picked up on this one. And where did I pick up on it? I repeated it with respect to Natasha's tweet about Lee's article. And Natasha's pull from that article was, The Intercept obtained police records showing that Hyde violated a restraining order issued by a Washington, D.C. Superior Court judge at the request of a Republican consultant who says that Hyde stalked her and intimidated her family over the last year. So, just to drive that home, is not only stalking somebody, but it's not a disgruntled Democrat trying to get him in trouble. It's a Republican person. Two, that he stalked her to the point where a judge issues a restraining order, but he violates the restraining order. Now, in response to his violation of the restraining order, by the way, Connecticut police at some point visit his home and confiscate his guns, which is a good thing. I'm glad that they did it. It makes sense, etc. But again, look at where this guy is. So he's contracting with people on the ground in Kyiv to monitor the movements of Yovanovitch. He's under restraining order in D.C. He's a constant fixture at Pervalago down in Florida. He's at Doral. He's at Pervalago. He's running for Congress somehow in Connecticut in the middle of all this. And he's at the World Series. And this guy is a world traveler. He's everywhere. He's in legal trouble outside of his own jurisdiction, plus legal trouble in his own jurisdiction. That also gets detailed in some of these articles. So, but basically, what we're saying here is you got a guy who's a repeat offender stalker who is, in addition to being a repeat offender stalker, is in violation of a restraining order and has had his guns confiscated by the police, and subsequently, though he believes himself to be on the Secret Service radar and is on the Secret Service radar, subsequently, months later, turns up in Trump's luxury box at the World Series. Who is allowing this? And, I mean, you saw he's on the Secret Service radar. First, we thought he was just paranoid. He thought the Secret Service was after him. Then we find out the Secret Service is monitoring him. In June, they were asking police in Connecticut about them, and Connecticut police are responding by confiscating his guns. But just think about a repeat stalker in violation of a restraining order who's had his guns confiscated by local police, still gets into the World Series luxury box with Trump. Is it a fluke? Is it one-time thing? No, it's not, because here again in a Twitter thread that I shared yesterday, a tip from our Twitter friend Der Wooter. Wooter says, shares video that I get to pass on. Here's video of that repeat stalker who, again, violated a restraining order, was involuntarily committed for a psychiatric evaluation, don't forget, when he was removed from Doral, and had his guns confiscated by the police. This is all like strikes against you with the Secret Service. You're a repeat stalker, violating a restraining order, once involuntarily committed for psychiatric evaluation, has had his guns confiscated by the local police. Okay, he gets to go to the World Series if he wants to, right? It's still his right to do that. Now, in the president's box, bad idea. But at least that never happened else, in another situation, right? Well, here's video of him at Mar-a-Lago introducing Trump to a new member that he says he sponsored for joining Mar-a-Lago. And by the way, who was that new member? He's the mysterious, weirdo, Chinese Buddhist artist guy, Chang Gao, who we started reading about yesterday and never finished his piece in Mother Jones. So this guy who's got big question mark as to what the hell he's doing anywhere, living in Trump Tower and joining Mar-a-Lago as well, but being introduced and sponsored somehow as for membership by this nobody who nobody understands where he came from. Bobby Hollywood, he's called in Wooter's tweet here. Robert Hyde is, king of Pervalago, and is videoing himself grabbing Trump's attention on a rope line in Mar-a-Lago and say, "Can I introduce you? I want to introduce you to a new member." "Oh, where? Who is he?" Okay, well, he's hanging around Mar-a-Lago, and he's going to the World Series. Lots of people go to the World Series. Surely the Secret Service is not falling down on the job here, right? Well, I'm not saying the Secret Service is falling down on the job. They're tracking him. And they're very competent, and they're very professional, and they're very brave people, and they're willing to cut it close to the line when a president would insist on it, I'm sure. But I think what's happening here, if you really are able to dig down into it, and this might not be discoverable, but I think it's pretty plain that the president is overruling the Secret Service and saying, "I want this guy near me." I think maybe he's just not that worrisome. He's harmless. He's just a big talker, but he seems to be overruling the Secret Service in all of this, not just for the World Series, although that has to be pretty explicit too. How do you get into the box he's watching the World Series in? Okay, you meet him at the rope line at Mar-a-Lago. They've made it clear that he's overruled the Secret Service about how they can deal with Mar-a-Lago people. But, there's more. Let's see. Let me go back and get this whole thing together. So, there's the number of pictures he has with Trump is crazy. But maybe he only got close to him at the World Series and at Mar-a-Lago. No. Here's a picture of the two of them in the pro shop of one of the golf clubs, both in the stupid USA hats. There's another picture of the two of them at what might be Doral inside the clubhouse there as well. Totally separate occasion. These all circulated by Hyde himself. There's the standard Washington White House blue curtain backdrop thumbs up for a meet and greet somewhere. But then there's another one of them at a campaign event. You can see a Trump-Pence sign on a podium behind the two of them. Then, of course, there's the pictures, as I said, with Ivanka, with Don Jr., with Eric, with Tiffany. This guy is constantly in Trump's presence, and he may or may not be trying to disclaim knowledge of who he is. But what's up with the Secret Service? And I'd like to have some answers about that one as well, as I think it would be rather incriminating to find out that Trump was personally intervening to overrule what I imagine would be the Secret Service's objection ordinarily to allowing Trump that much contact with a guy who's been involuntarily committed on mental health issues before, who's got paranoia issues, who's had his guns confiscated, and who's a habitual stalker and violator of court orders against his stalking. And yet, we don't have any real answers about that one. Natasha also had another tweet that I thought was worth sharing, and we might be able to get through before exiting today. Former ambassadors and security experts that she and Nahal Tusi, a reporter for Politico, spoke to, agreed on this. A threat to a U.S. ambassador coming from a U.S. citizen would probably be, one, more challenging to spot from a CI perspective, counterintelligence perspective, and two, harder to investigate from a legal perspective. This was really interesting in the quote that she provided here. They're not necessarily going to be looking for threats from a guy running for Congress in Connecticut, a former ambassador said. To get info on a U.S. person, any U.S. person, especially, though, one who is friends with the president, would require jumping through a lot of legal hoops. That is really pretty interesting. And, you talk about how crazy it is that the guy could be running for Congress, or he might even have a chance to sit on and vote on impeachment articles the way Devin Nunes did. Or for that matter, Senator Burr will, since he was a conduit from the Senate Intelligence Committee reporting to the White House the whole time too, or the avowedly partisan Mitch McConnell, of course. But what cover it was I'm curious about whether it was even premeditated cover or not. Why don't you run for Congress? As crazy as it is, it'll be extraordinarily difficult if you're doing the things you're doing for us that really warrant investigation. We have a lot better chance of having Bill Barr wave off federal law enforcement if you are, one, a friend of the president, but two, a candidate for Congress in your own right. I mean, we could claim that this is political interference. Once again, the Democrats are corruptly having the FBI bug my campaign and the campaigns of my political allies as well. And it would look for all the world like that was actually happening, because you'd have to convince people that while this guy's running for Congress, he's also possibly plotting the assassination of a U.S. ambassador. And who's going to believe that? And who's going to believe that a possible assassin of a U.S. ambassador would be invited repeatedly to party with the president, right? Awfully difficult to get past. That's true. That'd be pretty good cover if that's what it is. Stay tuned for more.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
The more, of course, does not come from me. It comes from Justice Putnam. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is next. He's got plenty to add to this wild situation that we're already finding ourselves in, including some additional Chinese spying allegations and more neglect and malfeasance in Puerto Rico from the president.